Rhodesia was a place that you either loved or you didn't care for very much. Grace was not as sold on Rhodesia as Garfield. He adored everything about it. He just fell in love with the country when they arrived. And he very quickly established a good relationship with the African people, which was vital to the whole thing. They went untutored into a situation where they were with black people. They had none of the established white attitudes. They went straight New Zealanders, and nobody told them a thing. And this is the basis of their happy association. I met his private secretary, and he happened to say, "How's the world treating you?" So I said, "Not very well, I'm looking for a job." And he said, "Would you like to work for the Prime Minister?" And I said, "Of course I'd like to work for the Prime Minister." The two of the ministers who rebelled against him, he would have gladly had it back working for him again. He was never bitter, except about what Mugabe did to the country. He was bitter about that but as personally, he never held any bitterness against his political opponents. It was perhaps in that way he didn't take it seriously enough, but I don't know. I was staying on the ranch for a holiday, and because of course by that time I was living in Scotland, and he said, "We want you to write my biography." And I heard a voice in my ear, whether it was Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder or the good Lord, I leave you to judge, saying, "Payback time." I'd had a very, very nice life, a comfortable life, interesting life, and payback time. There was no reason for me to do it except the one he gave, that I knew them better than anyone else. Otherwise, I was not. I mean, I'm an O-level dropout, and you don't really expect to write biographies when you're an O-level dropout. But I have to say, I enjoyed writing, and although I'd never written anything, it was, well, there it was. He asked me how long I thought I'd take. I said 5 years. 25 is the answer. I went out 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and twice in 99. And one of the reasons was not just to talk to people. Most of them were dead, so I couldn't. But the papers were in the archives, and I had to get affiliation to the university before they had to get me a certificate to conduct research from the President's office. I then had to get a work permit from immigration, and as a non-resident I could only work there in the archives for 6 weeks a year, hence all those journeys. And and also there was New Zealand, all the background. So I went to New Zealand for a month and saw an astonishing number of relations and friends. They would live a long time out there, and that was very satisfying. I went to the places where they'd lived. There is now a filing cabinet full of the long version, which I finished in about 15 years, and that is going to the Bodleian Library for their African Commonwealth and African Studies. And I also have a filing cabinet full of original documents and letters that are not in the archives in Zimbabwe, because most of them are there. But it took me 40 weeks of sitting there to go through those files. So it was extensive. He would recognize that it is obviously only part of the story, because there was far too much, the big, even, I mean, not everything's even in the long version, but I've had to cut out terribly because it's, in fact, I've called the book more like a doner kebab than anything else, because I've sliced it on down to the skewer, practically, and yet it's still a long book. Because he was trying to advance the Africans, they felt vulnerable, that they would lose. And of course they have. But he said the only way to keep what you've got is to share it. And he could never get the message. And his other great thing was, cooperate with the inevitable. And people, the whites couldn't see which way was to their advantage. And that was the sad thing. He could not convince them. And when de Klerk managed in South Africa to get the whites to accept, he wrote and said, 40 years ago I failed, but de Klerk's done it. I tried to pick up on what somebody said, that one should write about people with a warm heart and a cool mind, and that's how I've tried to do it. But obviously, I'm devoted to them and to their memory.